sold it, Dad. Last Tuesday, I needed the cash for Cabo. That was how my daughter told me. Standing in my kitchen on a Saturday morning in October, holding a coffee mug she didn't pay for, in a house she didn't pay for, telling me she'd sold the only piece of her mother I had left. My name is Russell Boatwright. I'm 68 years old. I worked 41 years as a structural engineer for the Ohio Department of Transportation, designed bridges across half the state, retired with a decent pension and a paid-off house in Worthington, just north of Columbus. My wife Genevieve passed in March of 2022, pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the funeral. We were married 36 years. The necklace was her grandmother's. A gold rope chain with a heavy oval locket that had little engraved violets on the front. Genevieve never took it off, not in the shower, not at night, not even at the end when the morphine made her forget my name. I unclasped it from her neck myself at the funeral home, sat in that little side room they have for families, and I cried so hard the funeral director brought me a paper cup of water and just stood there waiting. After that, I kept the locket in a velvet pouch in the top drawer of my dresser under a stack of folded handkerchiefs. I'd take it out some night, hold it in my palm, and the weight of it was the closest thing to her I had. My daughter is 41. Her name is Marisol. Genevieve's mother was Mexican, and we both loved that name when she was born. Marisol moved back in with me about 14 months after Genevieve died. Said she was getting divorced from her husband Brendan. Said the housing market in Cleveland was impossible. Said she just needed a few months to get back on her feet. She brought her son Tristan with her. Tristan was 11 at the time. He's 12 now, almost 13. A good kid, mostly. Quiet, likes his video games. Calls me Pop-Pop. What I didn't know the day Marisol moved her bags into Genevieve's old sewing room was that Brendan was coming too. He showed up about 6 weeks later with 2 duffel bags and a story about how he and Marisol were trying to work it out for Tristan's sake. I was a fool. I let him in. I told myself my daughter knew what she was doing. That was 3 years ago this past August. In those 3 years, neither of them paid me $1 of rent. Not one. They didn't buy groceries. They didn't pay the water bill or the gas bill or the cable, which Brendan upgraded to the premium sports package without asking me. Marisol did the laundry sometimes. Brendan mowed the lawn maybe 4 times the first summer and never again. He worked off and on as some kind of consultant. I never could pin down what he actually did. And Marisol picked up shifts at a wine bar in Short North on the weekends. They both had nicer cars than mine. They both took vacations. I let it slide. I kept telling myself, she just lost her mother. Give her time. He's trying his best. They're family. Genevieve would have wanted me to help. What Genevieve would have actually wanted, I came to understand, was for me to throw them both out the front door the day Brendan crossed the threshold. But Genevieve was the one with the spine in our marriage. I was the one who built bridges. She was the one who told me which ones to walk away from. So that Saturday morning in October 11th, I'll never forget the date. I had been looking for the locket. I'd had a dream the night before about Genevieve. One of those dreams where she was just sitting at the kitchen table doing the crossword like nothing had happened, and I woke up wanting to hold the necklace. I went to my dresser, opened the top drawer, and the velvet pouch was empty. I tore my room apart. I checked under the bed, behind the dresser, in the pockets of every coat in my closet. I checked the bathroom, thinking maybe I'd taken it out and set it down somewhere. I checked the kitchen counter, the living room, the basement workbench. I went outside in my slippers and checked the car. By 8:30 I was sitting on the edge of my bed with my hands shaking so badly I couldn't button my shirt. I went downstairs. Marisol was at the counter pouring coffee. Brendan was in the recliner watching college football pre-game with the volume too loud. Tristan was in his room with the door closed, which was where he usually was. "Marisol," I said, "I can't find your mother's necklace. The gold one with the locket." She didn't look up. She kept stirring her coffee. "Marisol, I sold it, Dad. Last Tuesday. I needed the cash for Cabo. I want you to understand. I want you to understand exactly what that moment was like. Because the rest of what I'm going to tell you depends on you understanding it. I felt every bone in my body go cold. I felt my left hand, the one with the arthritis, curl up into a claw by itself. I felt something in my chest, not a heart attack, I knew what those felt like. My brother had 3 of them, but something tearing. Like a seam coming apart. Brendan, from the recliner, without taking his eyes off the TV, said, "Babe, told you that was going to come up. That was the part that did it. Babe, told you that was going to come up." Like they had discussed this. Like they had calculated whether the old man would notice, and when, and what to say. "You sold it," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "Dad, it's not a big deal. It's a piece of jewelry. You weren't even wearing it. It was just sitting in your drawer. We're going to Cabo for our anniversary, your anniversary. Mine and Brendan's, our 15th. We needed the flights and the hotel, and you sold your mother's necklace." She finally looked at me, and there was nothing on her face. No shame, no fear, no hesitation, just a little bit of irritation, like I was being tedious. "Dad, she's been gone 3.5 years. You can't keep her in a drawer forever. It's actually unhealthy. My therapist says—" I walked out of the kitchen. I went into my study and closed the door and sat down at my desk. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. The light through the window changed. I was 68 years old, and I was thinking about my wife, and I was thinking that I had failed her, because she had trusted me to be the one who held on to that locket, and I had let our daughter sell it to a stranger so she could go drink margaritas on a beach. Then I started thinking about something else. I was thinking about how Marisol said, "Last Tuesday." It was Saturday. 5 days. If she'd sold it to a pawn shop, there might still be a holding period. In Ohio, by state law, pawn shops have to hold items for a minimum number of days before they can resell them. I remembered this because a colleague of mine had pawned his wedding ring during his divorce and bought it back 3 weeks later. There was a chance, a small one, but a chance. I picked up my phone. I called Marisol's cell from the desk. She answered with her irritated voice. "What? Where did you sell it? Dad! Marisol! Where did you sell it? Tell me right now, or I swear to God I'll call the police and report it stolen, and that is not a bluff." A long pause. Lakeshore Gold and Loan on Morse Road. I hung up. I knew the place. Strip mall next to a tax preparer and a place that sold vape pens. I'd driven past it 1,000 times. I got my coat and my keys and I walked out of the house without saying another word to either of them. To drive over, I kept both hands on the wheel and breathed through my nose like the cardiologist had taught me. I parked crooked in the lot. I went inside. There was a young guy behind the counter, maybe 30, wearing a Cleveland Browns jersey. The store smelled like glass cleaner and old leather. I told him about the necklace. Gold rope chain, oval locket, engraved violets, sold 5 days ago by a woman named Marisol Boatwright Halpern. I described it down to the small dent on the back of the locket where Genevieve had dropped it on the bathroom tile in 2007. He went into the back. I stood there with my hands flat on the glass counter, looking at a tray of wedding rings other people had given up on. He came back holding the velvet pouch. "My pouch, sir," he said. "We still have it." She came in Tuesday afternoon. We paid her $240. $240. For Cabo. For part of Cabo. Can I buy it back? You can. The price would be $320. That's our markup, plus the holding fee. Yes, Sir. He set the pouch down on the counter and put his hand flat on top of it. Before you do that, there's something I need to tell you. I waited. I'm a third-generation jeweler. My grandfather started this shop in 1971. When this came in on Tuesday, my dad was working the counter and he ran it through the appraisal because he thought the chain might be 18 carat. The locket, sir. Were you aware that this locket opens? It doesn't open. I tried. There's no clasp. There's a hidden release. It's a Victorian-era piece. My dad said it's probably from the 1890s. The mechanism is a pressure point on the side of the bezel. We open every locket we take in to check for residue or photographs that need to be returned to the owner. It's policy. He picked up the pouch. He poured the locket out into his palm. He pressed his thumbnail against a tiny spot on the rim, and the front of the locket clicked open like a little door I had never known was there. Inside, folded into a square no bigger than a postage stamp, was a piece of paper. It was already in there when we received it, he said. We didn't read it. We just refolded it and put it back. We figured whoever owned the necklace ought to be the one to read it. I had to sit down. He brought a folding chair around from behind the counter. I sat under the fluorescent lights of a pawn shop on Morse Road, and I unfolded a piece of paper my wife had hidden inside a locket that had been around her neck every day for 36 years. The handwriting was hers, cramped, slanted to the right the way it got when her hands hurt. The paper was thin, like the kind from a hospital pad. Russell, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you finally figured out the locket opens. I always knew you would, eventually, when you needed to. I'm sorry I never told you. I didn't want you to look until you were ready. Listen to me, my love. I know our daughter. I know her better than you ever let yourself know her. She is not a bad person, but she is a weak one, and Brendan is not weak. He is something worse. Do not let them stay in the house. If you are reading this, it means something has happened with the necklace, which means it has already started. Listen to me. Go to First Federal on High Street. Safe Deposit Box 4471. The key is taped to the underside of the third drawer of my sewing table. The card is in your name. I had it changed in February. There are things in the box you need. Documents. The deed work I had Howard do without telling you. Other things. Russell, do not feel guilty. You loved me well. You loved me every single day. Now love yourself. Throw them out. Live the rest of your life. I'll be waiting, but take your time getting here. Or of me, always, G. I sat in that folding chair and I cried. The kid behind the counter, I never even got his name. He stood there for a minute, and then he quietly walked into the back room and left me alone. When I could see again, I folded the paper, put it back in the locket, snapped it shut, and put the locket in my coat pocket. I went to the counter. I took out my wallet. I gave him $320 in cash. He wouldn't take it. On the house, he said. My grandfather would skin me if I charged you. I thanked him. I shook his hand. I walked out. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could drive. I did not go home. I drove straight to the High Street branch of First Federal. I'd had accounts there for 30 years. The teller was a woman named Patricia who'd known me since the kids were little. I asked her about safe deposit box 44711. She looked it up, and her eyebrows went up a little. And she said, "Mr. Boatwright, this box is registered to you. You've never accessed it. My wife set it up." "Yes, sir." February 2022. A month before she died. While she was already sick, while I was driving her to chemo 3 times a week and helping her bathe, Patricia walked me into the vault. She turned her key. I turned the one I'd found taped to the underside of the 3rd drawer of Genevieve's sewing table, exactly where she said it would be. The drawer pulled out. Inside the metal box was a manila envelope, a smaller white envelope, and a USB drive. I took it all home, not home. I went to a Bob Evans on San Cruz Boulevard, sat in a back booth, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and went through the envelopes. The manila envelope had the deed to the house. Genevieve had quietly, in February of 2022, transferred the property entirely into her name, and then, with Howard Lebowitz, our family lawyer for 25 years, set up a transfer on death designation that bypassed her will completely. As of her death, the house was 100% mine and could not be touched by Marisol, by her future husband, by any creditor, by anyone. There was a notarized letter from Howard explaining this in plain English, dated February 19, 2020, and signed by Genevieve. The white envelope had a printout of an email exchange between Brendan and a woman named Whitney Aldridge, dated September of 2021, 6 months before Genevieve died, when Marisol and Brendan were supposedly happily married up in Cleveland. The emails were explicit. They also discussed, in some detail, Brendan's plan to wait out the old lady, meaning Genevieve, because Marisol stood to inherit a paid-off house and probably $400,000 in retirement, and once we get her dad to sign that over too, we're set. Genevieve had known, for half a year before she died, while she was sick, while she was dying, my wife had known what her son-in-law was, and she had spent her last weeks not crying in bed, but driving herself downtown to a lawyer's office to lock the house down so I couldn't lose it. She had hired a private investigator, there was a receipt in the envelope, to get those emails. She had done all of it without telling me because she knew I would have wanted to confront Marisol, and she knew that would tip them off. She had also, I realized, slipped that letter into the locket and never said a word. For 3.5 years she had been waiting for me to find it, and the only way I would ever find it, the only way I would ever press the right spot on the bezel and see what was inside, was if something terrible happened that forced the locket out of my drawer and into someone else's hands. She had known her own daughter would be the one to do it. The USB drive, when I finally watched it that night, was a recording Genevieve had made on her laptop the week before she went into hospice. 43 minutes of her on the bed in our guest room because the cancer ward had moved her around so much she couldn't sleep in our own bedroom anymore, talking to me, telling me the things in the envelopes, telling me she loved me, telling me to find someone else if I wanted, that she'd be okay with it, telling me to throw Marisol out if it ever came to it, and not to feel guilty, because Marisol was an adult and Marisol had made choices, and our job as parents was over. I watched it twice. Then I drove home. It was past 9 o'clock. Brendan was still in the recliner watching a different football game now. Marisol was on the couch on her phone. Tristan was in his room. I walked over and I turned the TV off. "Hey," Brendan started. "Stand up," I said. Something in my voice made him stand up. "You have until Thursday to be out of this house. Both of you. 5 days. You take what you brought with you and nothing else. I'm not asking, I'm telling. If you're not out by Thursday at 5 o'clock, I will have you removed." Marisol started to cry immediately. The loud kind. The kind she'd done since she was 4. Brendan started to talk over her. telling me I couldn't do that this wasn't my house anymore, that he had tenants' rights, that they'd been here 3 years and he knew the law. I let him finish. Then I walked over to the kitchen table where I'd set down a folder, and I pulled out 3 things. The first was a copy of the deed showing the house was solely in my name, with the transfer on death documentation showing it had bypassed Marisol completely. The second was a printout of those emails between him and Whitney Aldridge. I'd highlighted the line about waiting out the old lady. The third was a copy of an Ohio statute on lodgers versus tenants. Howard had explained on the phone when I'd called him from the Bob Evans parking lot that because they had never paid rent, never signed a lease, and never been on any utility bill, they were not legal tenants. They were lodgers, and lodgers in Ohio can be removed with reasonable notice, which Howard said 5 days was, generously. Brendan read the emails. He went the color of skim milk. Marisol stopped crying. She read the emails too. Her hand went up to her mouth. She turned and looked at her husband, and I watched something break in her face that I had never seen before, something that I had been waiting for since she was a teenager and didn't know I was waiting for it. "Whitney," she said. "It's not what it. Whitney from your office? Whitney, babe, you said you were in Pittsburgh that weekend." I left them in the living room. I went upstairs and knocked on Tristan's door. He opened it. I said, "Buddy, can you come downstairs and get a snack with Pop-Pop?" He looked at me funny, but he came. I made him a grilled cheese in the kitchen while his parents tore each other apart in the next room. Tristan ate his sandwich. He said quietly, "Pop-Pop, are they getting divorced?" I said, "I think so, kiddo." He said, "Okay." That was all he said. Okay. 12 years old. He'd known longer than any of us. Brendan was out by Tuesday. He took a duffel bag and his Xbox and his car, and he was gone, and I have not seen him since. And from what I hear from a mutual friend, he is now living in his sister's basement in Akron, and Whitney Aldridge took out a restraining order against him in November. Marisol stayed 3 more days. She didn't speak to me. On Thursday morning, she came down with 2 suitcases. Tristan was already in the car because I had asked her, and she had agreed, because for the first time in her adult life she had nothing to bargain with, to let Tristan stay with me through the end of the school year. She kissed him on the head, told him she loved him, told him she'd see him on weekends. She did not look at me. She walked out the front door and got in a hoodie and drove away. She is living in an apartment in Hilliard now. She is working full-time at the wine bar plus a second job at a dental office answering phones. We speak on the phone about Tristan's school stuff. We don't speak about anything else. She has not apologized for the necklace. I don't think she will. I don't know if I want her to anymore. I think the apology I needed was the look on her face when she read the email about Whitney. The moment she realized that the man she had chosen over her father had been planning to use her and her dying mother the entire time. I think that is the only apology life is going to give me, and I have decided to accept it. Tristan is still with me. He'll be here through June. Then we'll see. He's doing better than I expected. His grades are up. He plays catch with me in the backyard in the evenings, even though neither of us is much good at it. He calls his mother every Sunday. He calls me Pop-Pop still. I sold the cable package back down to basic. I cancelled the premium streaming services Brendan had been mooching off. I started taking the morning walk Genevieve and I used to take together, the loop around the park and back along the creek. The first morning I did it alone. I cried the whole way. The second morning was a little better. By Christmas I was up to 2 miles without stopping. The locket is back in my dresser. The letter is in a frame on my nightstand now, where I can see Genevieve's handwriting first thing in the morning. I had a copy made for the safe deposit box, just in case. I converted Genevieve's old sewing room into a little workshop. I bought a small lathe, second-hand, off a retiree out in Dublin, and I've been turning wooden bowls. Cherry, walnut, maple. I'm not good at it yet. The first 6 were firewood. The 7th sits on the kitchen counter and Tristan eats his cereal out of it. He asked me last Sunday if I could teach him how to use the lathe this summer. I said yes. I said his grandmother would have liked that. Sometimes, late at night, I think about what would have happened if Marisol had never sold that necklace. If I had gone on for another 10 years, 15 years, with the locket sitting in my drawer, the letter folded inside it that I never knew was there. I might have died in this house with both of them still in it, never having read what my wife had to say to me. The thought makes my hands shake. I don't know what Genevieve was doing in those last weeks when she was already so weak she couldn't lift a coffee cup. I don't know how she found the strength to drive downtown, to meet Howard, to talk to a private investigator, to record a 43-minute video on a laptop she'd never used before. I don't know how she knew, with the kind of certainty she had, that her own daughter would one day put her hand into my dresser drawer and take that locket out. But she knew. Somehow she knew, and she set up every single thing I would need, 3.5 years before I needed it, and she trusted me to find my way to it when the time came. That's what love is, I think. Not the easy kind. The other kind. The kind that plans for the worst version of the people you love and protects you from them and never tells you it's doing it, because it doesn't want you to have to know. I'm 68 years old. I have a grandson who calls me Pop Pop. I have a workshop in the back room and a wife in a frame by the bed. I have a paid-off house in Worthington, Ohio. And I have the rest of my life, and I am going to spend it the way Genevieve told me to. I am going to live it. I've thought about that locket every single morning since the day it came home to me. Not because of the gold or the violets engraved on the front or even the letter folded inside it. I think about it because of what it taught me about cause and effect, about how every small choice we make stacks up quietly, year after year, until one day the weight of all of them comes down on us at once. Marisol didn't wake up one Tuesday morning and decide to be the kind of person who sells her dead mother's necklace. She got there one tiny choice at a time. The first time I let her move back in without paying rent. The first time I pretended not to notice when Brendan walked through my door with his duffel bags. The first time I told myself she'd just lost her mother, give her time, when what she really needed was a boundary. I taught her, without meaning to, that my love had no edges, and love without edges isn't love. It's just permission. That's the part that took me a long time to accept. I didn't get betrayed because I was a good man surrounded by bad people. I got betrayed because I let 3 years go by without ever once making my daughter and her husband uncomfortable. Genevieve knew that about me. She loved me anyway, and she planned around it because she understood something I didn't. That protecting the people you love sometimes means protecting them from themselves, and protecting yourself from the version of them you don't want to see. What I want any man my age to hear, if you're listening to this, is that gentleness is not the same thing as weakness, but tolerance, or being used absolutely, is. There is no virtue in letting your own family hollow you out. There is no medal waiting for the father who gives and gives until there is nothing left. Your wife, if she's gone, would not want it. Your children, deep down, do not respect it. And the man you used to be, the one who built things, who showed up for work for 40 years, who stood at the altar and meant every word, That man deserves better than to spend his last decades being treated like a doormat with a pension. The strength I needed wasn't in my arms. It was in saying one true sentence out loud in my own kitchen. 5 days. Be out by Thursday. That was the whole thing. Once I said it, the rest took care of itself. I'm not angry at Marisol anymore. I'm sad for her. The way you're sad for someone watching them learn the lesson the hard way after you couldn't teach it the easy way. But I'm not going to carry her choices for her. That's hers to carry. Mine is to live the life Genevieve told me to live in the house she made sure I'd keep, with the grandson she never got to meet, turning bowls on a lathe and walking the loop by the creek every morning until the morning I don't anymore. That's what I learned. That's what the Locket gave me.